It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. A guest on here today that is kind of, I consider a bit of a guru in this field, and it's pretty near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about something called TRE today, tension trauma release exercises. So today I get a chance to sit down and have an amazing chat, real eye-opening conversation with TRE Australia's Richmond Heath. So the TRE has made a huge impact in my life. I would consider TRE and a lot of other somatic work that I've done to be some of the best tools in my toolbox for my own well-being. TRE is kind of introduced to me a number of years ago, about 2 to 3 years ago. And it didn't take long before I knew that I needed to be certified in TRE. My goal is to share it with the first responder community, but also to everyone I come in contact with. TRE saved my life. TRE changed my life. And I truly think that every first responder listening to this right now, or a loved one of a first responder, I think everyone should try TRE at least once, experiment with it, and see how it can change your life. What it does is essentially rebalances your whole nervous system. And for me, my nervous system was completely fried and on the brink of not functioning at all. So TRE, within only a few sessions, really allowed me to get back to my old self, to feel calm, to actually have my mind rest, to feel like my body could actually move and bend more, to feel no pain. It changed my life. So this episode, like I said, Richmond Heath, kind of an expert in this field, along with Dr. David Berselli. And he's sharing his nuggets of wisdom of doing TRE and his background in body work in general. So if you're interested in some somatic work, I highly recommend this episode. You're probably going to want a pencil and paper to take down some notes. And I just encourage you and I challenge you to take your own self-care into your own hands and reach out to a TRE provider or somebody else that you fit well with and see how some somatic work can heal you. Talk therapy is amazing. All these other things, modalities of, acupuncture and massage, they're all huge benefits to your well-being. And some people it might work amazing for, and some people it might not be quite as effective. But for me, TRE was a life changer. So I hope you enjoy this episode. It means a lot to me to sit down with Richmond Heath, and hope you enjoy it. All the best to you. Until next time, stay well. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Today I got a very special guest right across the world. And today, actually, when we're recording it, it's July 31st, where I am. And where my guest is, it's August 1st. So I am talking with Richmond Heath over in Australia today. Welcome to the show, Richmond.
Yeah, g'day, Arjuna, and all your listeners. Thanks very much for having me. It's a joy to be able to chat to you.
Fantastic. So you're not a first responder, but I know you work with a lot of first responders in particular. Love to hear a bit about your past, who Richmond Heath is, and how you became to working with first responders so closely.
Yeah, so my main background was as a physiotherapist, and I was always, interested in the human body. I did that for a number of years, but I didn't really feel like my calling at the time. I was much more interested in almost mental health and psychology and that sort of thing. But my sort of relevant story, as these days we would recognize, physios and health workers as a frontline worker, not necessarily a first responder. And with COVID pandemic, we all understand that there's similar kinds of stresses. Mm-hmm. But the difficulty for me is I got to about 32 or 3 and I was getting burnt out. I didn't know that concept or that term at that time. All I knew was my body was starting to break down because the primary way I tried to keep myself functioning and happy was using exercise and sport. But I got to the point where, I had chronic calf injuries, so I couldn't run anymore, Achilles tendonitis. Then I had shoulder chronic shoulder impingement issues. So I couldn't swim anymore. And I literally remember calling my brother and saying, "Hey, Bill, I can't do the things I used to do to keep myself happy." So what I experienced was, looking back, I was someone who had high functioning anxiety. I was highly functioning, playing high level sport. I was, working at a high level, but internally my system was really running on overdrive, and I just didn't really know that much about it. And so my body I describe it like my body ground me down to a high. I can't continue living like this. And it was partly also the stresses of having a young family and trying to earn money and all those sorts of things. One of my other brothers sent me off to a meditation retreat. So I did a few 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreats. And on one of those retreats, as I was meditating, when I got to a point where I was just paying attention to my body sensations and not really being involved in trying to control them, my body started to slowly move. At first, it just started to rock forwards, sort of fall forwards. And I remember thinking, I'm meant to be meditating, but I'm thinking, wow, I'm not doing that. My body's rocking forwards. And then it was just about to tip forwards. I was in a seated position. I'm thinking, I'm going to fall on my face. And then my body sort of jolted, and then it started to rock me back. And it was this fascinating experience where I'm saying, my body's not doing that. And so in this meditation format, you're not meant to move. So I snuck back into the hall at night at like 10:30 when everyone had gone to bed. And I started meditating. And as I was just observing my body, my arms started to move in all these sort of spiral patterns, which to my physio brain made sense. But before that retreat, I couldn't lift my arm above my shoulders without pain. And after, 15 minutes of letting my body spontaneously move, my arm could be completely above the back of my head, like going into positions that I just couldn't believe. So in that moment and over that period of time, what happened was I discovered that my body had an ability to, let's say, relax, release, heal me, or, reorganize my movement and my function in a way that I could never do consciously. Now, at the time, I had no model for that. All my family were like, "You've just gone crazy," because, I'd say, "Look, I'm just letting my body move and stretch," and it felt incredible. And so it wasn't then until about 10 years later that someone gave me a DVD on TRE, did some simple exercises, had a tiny vibration in my inner thigh, and then I slept like I hadn't slept in 35, 40 years. And I got up the next day, and this chronic tension I'd had in my calves was just gone. Like my heels felt like they were through the floor. So in that moment, I hadn't even made the connection between those two events, but I was like, this little shaking, tremoring is doing something completely different to everything else that I'd tried. And I'd tried absolutely everything, to try and relax my body. So I'd been teaching Pilates at that time. Had a background in working in mental health and youth suicide prevention, Aboriginal studies and cultural health and wellbeing. So I had a really diverse background. And it wasn't really till I came back to this shaking and tremoring mechanism through the TRE model that I finally felt like, oh, right, this is what I'm meant to be doing with my life. As a physiotherapist, teaching people how to use this spontaneous movement response in order to optimize their health and well-being, to prevent PTSD and burnout, but also to help people come alive and feel more connected to themselves and connected to others in their relationship and the world around them.
Do you think that movement that you're experiencing with your arms, was that a fascia stretch? Do you think that that's what that was, or is that something different?
Look, so for me, the more I teach TRE and the more I work in this field, the less I care about what we call stuff. So in the early days of TRE, all the shaking, it was all about muscular release. We talked about the psoas muscle, that deep sort of flexor muscle right in the core of the body. Then when we see these movements, we talk about fascial releases, and I'm sure it is, because it's not just stretching a certain part of the body, it's more the connected whole. But then in 500 years, Arjuna, I always say, we will look back at our explanations for what's happening, and people will laugh at us and say how medieval we were. So, all I would say is it was about the movements were taking my body into places that I couldn't consciously do. It was also everything I'd learned about strength training went out the window, because after a few days of just following my body and letting it move around, at one point, I remember I was lying on the floor, my body was rolling around, then my feet kind of went up onto the wall like a handstand, and I could do a single arm sort of handstand push-up with my arm above my head, upside down, almost effortlessly. Whereas, 3 days before, I couldn't lift my arm above my shoulder. So
Oh.
Everything I'd been taught about the mechanics of strength training and all that sort of went out the window because there was this, you know, what we call absolute strength, different to maximal strength. And I think this is really relevant for people who are in the performance field, like first responders are. When the body is able to move itself, like what we would call neurogenically, meaning that the nervous system is generating the movement, I'm not doing it consciously. Some physios in Australia working with similar to TRE, but spontaneous movements have shown that the body can create greater strength neurogenically, so when it's moving under load, than we can ever create volitionally. So we're greater than our 1 repetition max. So people who work at the gym, work out at the gym, it makes sense. If you're at your maximum capacity, you're pushing up 60 or 80 kilos or whatever it is, and your body starts to shake, effectively what happens is the body, collapses. It's like, that's too heavy. It collapses, and then it grips on and it's thrust that weight back up faster than you can consciously move it. So it's very simple to understand, wow, we can train the body to levels beyond our conscious maximal strength volitionally. And even professional weightlifters, most people only access, professional weightlifters up to 80, 85% of their absolute strength that's available in their body. So there's a whole lot of different ways at looking at, TRE. We tend to look at it in terms of active recovery is probably my main area, and, releasing tension and that, but it's also a tool that really can help people improve their performance, which, first responders, like if we said to a first responder, look, you're going to do your job 10 times better. All you need to do is be stressed and traumatized for the rest of your life. Most of them will probably say, okay, I'll do it. Because the focus isn't on, I want to feel good. The focus is, I want to serve. I want to do my best. So it's important that we don't just get focused on how do you get rid of stress without saying, how does this actually improve our performance?
Yeah, there's a phrase that us firefighters call as industrial athletes. So we consider the fire service as an industrial athlete. So goes hand in hand with exactly what you're saying there of, we are performers. We are performance athletes, just in a different capacity than what you see on the news, right? Or on.
Yeah, that's right. That's 100%. And why that's so relevant is the biggest breakthroughs in athletic performance over the last, 10 to 15 years. Some of it's come through improved training and understanding, but a lot of it has come on a new focus on recovery. So I like to talk about the concept of active recovery. So when I grew up, our sports people, they played hard, then they went out and they drank hard, and they turned up and they played hard again. These days, I've got some friends who play elite level AFL football. They play a night game that finishes at 11 o'clock. They go back to the club to do their ice baths, their stretching. They don't get home till 1:30. So they're dedicating this time to complete the activation cycle where they're performing, but then there's all this time and effort put into recovery because they know that if they recover better, they will be able to perform better. So this is where the TRE and the tremoring and breathwork and mindfulness and all those different tools that help us restore the body back to sort of relaxation and peace and comfort after activation, effectively being able to switch off, finding the off switch. That's not just about preventing burnout and PTSD, although that's absolutely critical, but it's also about improving performance. So this is why I see this, TRE and the tremoring as such a valuable and obvious tool for as you say, athletes,
industrial athletes.
Industrial athletes is the term, yeah.
Yes.
Like, first responder athletes. So this is where it fits both sides of the, it fits both sides of the model.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear your view and your kind of elevator pitch, if you want to call it that, of what TRE is and how it could benefit firefighters. So if you came across a firefighter who had no clue what this is, how would Richmond Heath describe it?
So look, what I'd say is that we're going to deliberately invoke a spontaneous shaking, trembling, or movement reflex in the body. And then I'd say, have you ever seen someone shaking after an accident, either yourself or some people that you're working with, or even if not that, dogs shaking in a thunderstorm? So we've all seen this shaking response. And all you need to know is that that shaking is not helping the body to fight and flee. That's very obvious. And it's not helping the body to freeze and to immobilize. So that's very obvious. So it's not part of our stress and trauma response. We often say, oh my God, I'm shaking because I've got all this adrenaline. But adrenaline isn't there to make our body shake, because that's not helping us fight or overcome a stressor or deal with a challenging situation. The shaking and trembling is how the body recovers. It's how it dissipates and uses up the adrenaline in the most efficient and effective way. So I'd explain it like that. Basically, the shaking and the tremoring is the recovery response. And one of the things that we find in, especially in the first responder community, is this cycle of resilience. Brilliant at activating themselves to meet the challenge, amazing at enduring, working for long periods of time. And when we look at the neurochemicals of that, you've got adrenaline, which gives you that initial quick activation to get you up and ready and working at your peak. Cortisol comes in a little bit later. It takes longer to come into the body. It takes longer to be used up, and that gives you that long-term energy. And we train that. First responders are incredibly proud and should be about, we're strong, we endure, we never surrender, we keep going, we do what needs to be done. But the critical part of that cycle then is, once that stressor or, challenge is over, do we train how to downregulate, get the nervous system back to a calm place so that when you hit the pillow at night, you sleep like a baby? And that's the critical part that we rarely train in our first responder community. And if we do, often we'll be like, yeah, we want to have gyms and weights. If you're not out at a fire, we need your strength so your body's capable of meeting those challenges. But rarely do we say, hey guys, but we need to invest just as much time training your nervous system to be able to switch off to a level of serene, peaceful relaxation. And one of my key points, Arjuna, and a lot of organizations don't like hearing it, but if your first responders are leaving work at the end of the day with higher levels of adrenaline and cortisol than they started the day with, you are not meeting your obligations to maintain their psychological, mental health, physical health, and well-being. Too often we're expecting our first responders to invest their own time and their own money to cope with the stresses that we require them to do during their work. So we really need a revolution in terms of how we view this, in the same way that I say about sports people. Elite sports people now go, recovery, critical. It's built into their structure. We do it as a team. It's just as important as the preparation and the performance. But still, in our first responder and frontline health, we say, we're going to work you till the end of your shift, and then it's up to you to go home and recover. So effectively, I need you to pay for your recovery in your own time. We'll give you some tools on that, but it needs to become something where this cycle of adrenaline and cortisol, it switches on. No one has any problem switching it on to get to work, or at least before they get into the stages of burnout. But we need to be training it to switch off. So at the end of the day, you walk out with a smile on your face. Sure, you're going to be tired. You're going to be, physically done. But in terms of your stress levels, you need to be walking out the door going, I'm back to a peaceful, relaxed place. So now I can go home and be a peaceful, relaxed, partner, father, brother, community member. So I know that's a bit of a, but it drives me insane, because we have organizations that are constantly saying, oh, we're really committed to the well-being of the people. I say, well, how much time and money are you investing in paying them for their recovery time? And the answer is, generally, we do a training seminar once every month or a couple of months, and that, not actually investing in recovery. And that's critical in order to be able to complete the cycle of resilience so that people get stronger and healthier. I presume it's the same in the US, but we know that in Australia, the longer people are in first responder services, their resilience and their mental health and their physical well-being all decline the longer you're in service. And the missing link, it's not just because of the work that people are doing, it's because we're not training this full recovery cycle.
That is pure gold. I firmly believe, and I'm fully behind that 100%. I know in the mental health aspect, we're starting to talk about the recovery aspect of mental health. So you come back from a mental health crisis or whatever, and how are we going to help you recover from that versus jumping right back into work? Same thing goes for your nervous system. Leaving the fire station, if we could leave the fire station more relaxed, more calm than when we arrived, holy, that's going to change the world. That's going to change the world. I like that.
Yeah, that's right. And, think about how much training you do to develop the skills and the physical and mental capacity to do your job under extreme stress, and in very traumatic situations. So that's not something that happens overnight. You don't do a one-day training and then it's like, right, just go and develop that. Constantly building those skills. And it's the same with our capacity to recover. So, like any skill, you could do a meditation weekend and you're like, fantastic, that felt great. But then once you're under stress again, it can be hard to go, I want to consciously switch my body off. Most people don't develop that skill because we don't train it. And the more you train the nervous system's capacity to switch off, the better and easier it becomes. And the research is very clear that if people are able to get their physiology, and this is really critical, to get their physiology, their nervous system, their hormonal systems back to homeostasis immediately after a trauma, they are highly unlikely to develop PTSD. So we all know that, whatever happened at work finished, or the car accident was back there, or the trauma was back there, but our body is still continuing that on. And if it was a matter of cognitive choice, we would all just choose to let that go. But we can't. So there's this underlying neurobiology or physiology in the body where the nervous system is activated be outside the level of our conscious control. And so this is where TRE is a significant point of difference to other techniques, because things like mindfulness, breathwork, and even exercise, they're actually top-down techniques looking for a bottom-up effect. So, for example, I could say, okay, consciously calm your body down. Well, you can only do that to a certain level. It's similar to, you think about, if you've got a tight muscle, I can say, Arjuna, relax those shoulders. And you're like, I can't. If I tell you to tighten those shoulders up, you can, but the limit to how much you relax is generally not up to you. That's up to the nervous system. And this is where TRE is so unique in this field. It doesn't make it better than other techniques. And really, we want to use them in conjunction. It's not about competing at all. You want to use them in conjunction, because the shaking and the tremoring that the body or the nervous system is organizing itself is below the level of our conscious control. And that's where all our unresolved stress and trauma is generated. None of us are choosing to have chronic cortisol levels or, low back pain or digestive issues. So it's giving us this entry point to re-regulating the nervous system in a way that no other, in a different way to, consciously directed techniques. And the beauty then is when you combine this, it's really shifting our baseline level of ability to switch off and relax in the physiology of the body, the effectiveness of our other, consciously directed top-down techniques like mindfulness, breath work, general exercise, progressive muscle relaxation, all of those things, mindset training, all of those things get more effective. So, from my point of view, I say it's literally a no-brainer to be adding this in, training the nervous system to. And the beautiful thing, it's not just about letting go of the stresses of the day, but when we activate this tremor mechanism, it starts to reduce our baseline level of stress and tension in the body. So we actually start to build and train what I like to call neurobiological resilience. So it's not just my mental capacity to endure, it's my physical, my structure's ability to ramp up, perform at the peak, be highly adrenalized, have high cortisol to endure that, but then the ability to go, right, shift's over, fire's finished. Now my nervous system is at an elite level of going, how quickly can we turn off, get back to relaxation? And in fact, like training at the gym where, you tear your muscles and that's how you grow strength because they repair. When you train that cycle, at the end of that cycle and you sleep, you don't go back to your baseline and go, wow, I haven't got stress today. You actually start to build neurobiological resilience and strength in the body. And ultimately, resilience is the ability, it's not the ability to endure. It's not resilience in scientific terms. It's not, if you bend a metal, how far can you bend it without breaking? It kind of is, but really it's about that when you let that pressure go, it can come back to its set point. That's where, resilience we often think about is, can you cope with the stresses? Can you perform under pressure? That's not really resilience. That's endurance. Right. Resilience is going, once the pressure is finished, can you go back to being just as relaxed as you were as a 3-year-old child when your body was soft and relaxed and your breath was calm and natural and you're, sleeping like a baby. Mm-hmm. That's the key bit that, we need to be training. And again, why TRE is so valuable. And I like to put in, Arjuna, TRE is just one way of working with spontaneous movements. In Japan, they've got Katsugen Undo, which is called loosely translated as regenerative movement. In Bali, bioenergetic shaking, the Kalahari Bushmen talk about, I can't pronounce the name. They've got like the clicking sounds like nyom or something. So there's lots of cultures around the world that deliberately use this shaking and tremoring reflex. So I want to be really clear. TRE is just a neuroscientific Western model for us to access it and view it through a trauma-informed lens, which is incredibly helpful.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, what we're doing is accessing this innate recovery response in the human body that all too sadly in our Western community, we've pathologized, we've overlooked it. In mental health field, we say shaking's a symptom of anxiety. It's a symptom of PTSD. In the gym, you start shaking in the gym, well, that's a sign of weakness and fatigue and a lack of control. If you're shaking at the, after the scene of a fire or a car crash, we're like, oh, you're losing it. You're starting to lose control. So we've simply just misunderstood this sense of, hang on, great, yeah, it's over. Your body's trying to recover and down-regulate you so you're ready to go again. But if we don't understand that, then unfortunately, it gets suppressed and inhibited in all those fields, individually, collectively, in an entire fire force. And it's really sad because it's such simple information. It makes sense. As soon as people hear about it, they go, oh, right, this makes sense. So when I'm shaking after a traumatic or critical incident, I need to let that happen because that's my body trying to recover. You're like, yes. And if I suppress it, you know what's going to happen? It's like putting the lid on the discharge or the David Berceli's got the decompression. It's the way the body decompresses. And if we don't let it happen, guess what? We're just putting plugging the hole and it's going to build up. And then we all sit around at conferences going, geez, we've got all these problems with resilience. What can we do? Blah, blah, blah. And we go, well, we just need to and train that capacity for the body to compress, meet the challenge, and decompress. And we can't do that if we don't normalize and depathologize this shaking and tremoring reflex, which is natural in all mammals and every single person on the planet.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah, I know when I first started going to my first house fires back in the day, my legs would shake uncontrollably while I was driving to the incident. But the beautiful thing is when I got there, I was cool as a cucumber. So what was happening through, I didn't know at the time, but it was dissipating my energy, my nervous system was dissipating that adrenaline, I guess it was, right? Is that correct? Adrenaline?
Yeah, so adrenaline builds up to get you to fight or flee, but in the truck, you're just sitting still. So the body can't create movement, it can't run, it can't increase its strength. And so that takes us out of, normal homeostatic relaxed state. So the body's going, I've got all this adrenaline for movement, but at the moment, I can't move. Right. So let's use it up most efficiently through this small shaking reflex. It's more energy efficient. It's the way animals do it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a perfect example where you can look back now and say the shaking was helping improve your performance because you were more relaxed. Whereas if you had have suppressed that and held that in, your nervous system's going, I've just had a big shot of adrenaline, siren's gone off, we're all pumped. And then if that's not down regulating, you're all tense. And no one performs better when they're tense. The more cool, calm, and physiologically relaxed, the better. So, that's a great example where, if you're tremoring before performance, it can be used after for recovery, but before, that's helping your body perform better in the moment. So again, this is why this shaking response and this critical information for first responders, it's not just about, let's prevent PTSD, let's stop burnout. It's actually about, let's perform better. Let's be even more elite than we are, and let's do it in a way that's not costing us with our mental health, physical well-being. And this is what I find, quite sadly, Arjuna, is a lot of people, eventually they get burnout and they need to quit and they can't do the job that they love. They love serving. It's a brilliant job. And they get to the point where I just can't do it anymore because it's costing me too much. And so not only does that cause a huge amount of cost to the fire services and the community for retraining and recruitment and all those issues, but at an individual level, that person's now like going, I've got to find another career. And for some people like yourself, you're like, wow, this is leading me on to something bigger and greater. But for many people, they're like, you know what? I love firefighting. I love being in the Defence Force, but I just couldn't keep doing it. So that's the real sadness for me is people often lose their passion and their purpose for this incredible job that they're doing. So critical element is the big fear for all organizations really is saying, hang on, we're already working at capacity. We can't afford to take 20 minutes off the end of each day and get people to down-regulate. That's the big fear. But what we need to recognize is when you take into factor the costs of retraining, the difficulty with recruitment, the rates of burnout, financially, it makes sense. There's lots of people who've gone in Australia, research onto doing a 4-day work week. People are like, we can't do it. And they find repeatedly that people get the same amount of work done. It's done more efficiently. They're all happier. Everything works really well, but it takes that courage. And that this is the critical thing. I think people listening to this, it takes leadership for someone to be able to say, you know what, we can't just keep going with the status quo. We can't keep saying, oh, but there's nothing we can do because we haven't got enough stuff. Someone has to say, you know what, we need to prioritize this, not just for the well-being of for our personnel, but actually for the well-being of our organization. And that financially and in terms of effectiveness and output, it's actually going to improve. And again, I just go straight back to the example of elite athletes. That's been the critical sort of element in really pushing elite athlete performance through in the last few years. Yeah, they actually train. They don't train harder anymore. They train less. They train smarter, but they recover much more significantly. They invest a whole lot of time into recovery. And as industrial athletes, this is the next step that all our first responder organizations need to understand and they need to implement if we want to maintain well-being, but also keep optimizing the elite performance of the teams.
Well, this whole post-traumatic crisis, I guess you could say, across the world.
Epidemic, yep.
Yeah, it's a crisis, epidemic. What you're saying essentially is by regulating our nervous system, we could eliminate PTSD, post-traumatic stress. 100% or almost? I just want to almost restate that because that's so powerful.
Well, let's say 99.9%. But
yes, okay.
The way I would say it is if we have the ability to down-regulate our nervous system, to literally let go the stress and trauma and the fight and flight, the defensive responses that are activated, then no, yes, we would eliminate it in those cases. So the issue, of course, is do we all have the capacity to down-regulate, train our nervous system? And I'd say, well, we're all going to have varying abilities, a bit like, if you've got a golden retriever dog, it's just naturally calm, its nervous system is very relaxed. You've got a border collie, it's already hypersensitive and hyperactive. So there's going to be varying degrees in the ability to train that. But I always like the example, Arjuna, of the samurai warriors. So, when we think about samurai, they're like famous for having superhuman capacities, spinning up onto buildings and doing all this superhuman stuff. But then also the other side of it is they're like chilled out Zen masters, completely peaceful and relaxed. So one of the secret practices they had was called Seiki Jutsu, effectively, roughly translated as life force yoga. And what it involved is they would meditate to the point where their body started to spontaneously move. So in TRE, we do it a different way. We just use a little exercise or lying on your back so you can go into it. But effectively, they were training their nervous system's capacity to downregulate. And by working with this spontaneous movement, this is part of the key way where they're known for being, superhuman. They weren't superhuman. They were just training themselves at the level of their nervous system in a way that other people who are training consciously weren't doing. So, there's an example for me of, training peaceful warriors to an elite level. The samurai give us that example. Every army and every force, they were doing all the other combat training and the strength training, but they had something different. And it was this spontaneous movement practice that in TRE, we just package up and say, look, just go into it this way. You don't need to meditate to access it, although doing all that mindfulness is also really valuable and a big factor. But that's the magic of TRE. And a lot of people, when they hear about it, go, oh, you got to learn some exercises and you have to do that, but there's no exercises required. Everybody can be tremoring within 30 seconds to a minute, lying on the floor, lying in bed. This is, I say to people, if you can't get to sleep at night, if you're working flat out, no one's looking for an extra exercise program. I want to do 30 minutes of exercises. But if I say, if you don't fall asleep immediately or within a couple of minutes when you hit the pillow at night, well, you've got 10 minutes to bring your knees up and do a shake and tremor and down regulate there. Or if you wake up and you can't get back to sleep, bring your knees up, do the tremoring then. If you wake up early in the morning, you've got time and it wakes you up, do it in the morning. So it is super easy and efficient to start. All we're really doing is mobilizing an internal resource that we've all got that we're just all not using. So it's so super efficient because at the end of the day, when you've worked a whole shift and you've been switched on mentally, most people are going, I don't want to go home and grab my mind and try and meditate and focus for another hour or half an hour. Now, if you do, brilliant, but most of us don't want to. And if you've been on the hoses all day or on ladders and you're physically exhausted, or you're fighting wildfires, as you call them, or bushfires, last thing you want to do is go, hey, let's go and hit the gym. That all works well in the quiet times. But when you're physically exhausted and you most need your recovery mechanisms working, we don't have the mental energy or the physical energy to do mindfulness or go and do some breathing. And this is the great thing is with the spontaneous tremor mechanism, because the body's generating the movements itself, it doesn't take any mental focus. It doesn't take any physical effort. So when you're most exhausted is when it's most accessible and effective, because you go, hey, you just lie down and let go. You just lie down and relax. In fact, you don't even have to do anything. You watch the football. You can watch TV. You can read a book if you want to. You can talk to your colleagues. You can be lying on the floor back at the station having a chat about the day or laughing about the night, but your body is generating the movements. So this is, again, where it's so significantly different from other techniques that tend to take mental or physical effort and focus. This is the complete opposite. It's truly just about letting go and surrendering. In the same way that we talk about falling asleep. You can't sort of think yourself to sleep. You can't exercise yourself to sleep. There's a point at which the body just takes over and you fall. That's why I call it falling to sleep. Similar with TRE, you just surrender and let go and your body takes over. So this is a critical, again, point of difference, because it bypasses the barriers that we generally have to regular self-care practices and maintaining. And as I say, most importantly, when you're working at your absolute capacity and effort levels, most people are going, I'm too exhausted to now put in energy to recovery. And that's beautiful, because you don't need to put in that energy. The body delivers that energy and generates it for yourself. So it's super, super efficient.
I love how you focus so much on the recovery aspect of it versus a preventative. I think recovery is such an element of industrial athletes, first responders, that we just totally dismiss. So I think that aspect of recovery, I think, is so critical. So I appreciate that real focus on that aspect of it.
Yeah, and the thing is, when we look at it in a cycle, and on my website there's some presentations that I highly recommend people go and watch, so you can see some slides and get the understand adrenaline and cortisol levels. But when we look at well-being and performance as a cycle, we can say, I've done my shift, now I'm in recovery mode. But if you look at it from the perspective of the next cycle, the recovery mode is the prevention and the preparation for the next cycle of activation.
Sure.
So when we look at it like that, recovery is prevention is recovery, and then both of that is working towards optimizing our performance in the moment when we need it.
Beautiful.
And the reason I say that is my real passion around the TRE. Why I'm so passionate about it is it's not therapeutic where I'm saying you need to keep seeing me. You need to come. I've got the magic. I'm going to help you. Is going. I'm going to teach you how to access it, how to make sense of it, and then you've got it in your pocket. You can use that, pull that tool out whenever you need to. And so if we were to be training, first responders when they're first inducted into the services and they learn this, then we don't have to go, we've got to work with recovering from PTSD. We're going to be preventing it, because people are stopping all those little micro accumulative stresses and traumas where we have an incident, we get a bit stressed, the body doesn't recover. Now our baseline is a little bit higher than it was. The next day we go to work, same process. And this is the process of cumulative trauma that builds up over time, which is well reported to be just as significant, having a negative impact to first responders as critical incidents. It's this sense, it's just the step-by-step, day-by-day build up in the physiology. And the term we have for it, and in Australia, it's a badge of honor, is harden up, or hardening up. You got to toughen up. Now, again, that's great because it helps us toughen up and deal with the stresses, but we need to be able to soften down afterwards. So when we get home, we're not a ball of, built up stress and tension that we bring that home to our partners and our families and our kids. So yeah, again, it's about training this full cycle.
Love it. Yeah, TRE has been a game changer for me. I definitely don't feel I would be sitting in front of you right now if I didn't learn TRE to help my nervous system. There's no doubt about it. So I owe TRE to my recovery, I believe. So
Yeah, look, same for me. And I've done lots of other different things and stuff as well. But for me, what happened was once I just had this spontaneous movement reflex, initially through meditation and with no framework. But then once I started using this tremor reflex, the way I describe it, Arjuna, was for the first time in my life, I had a way where I could discharge my stress or decompress in a healthy way. So up until then, I could drink alcohol or, overeat food, which I still do to some degree, but those things would tend to numb me out and disconnect me from my body to give me a short-term fix, but wouldn't really deal with it. I used to use exercise because that was, dissipating it to a certain degree, but it's really only letting the top of, it's like opening the lid of a boiling pot. It's like letting the steam out, but underneath it was the flames under the pot were still burning. And the only other way up until I found TRE was basically through sex, whether it was on my own or all too often I laugh, on my own or with a partner. But sex and ejaculation and orgasm was the only way that then afterwards I go, oh, now I feel like my body is more relaxed. But of course, that's quite draining and can be quite depleting on the system. And so this is where once I had this tremor mechanism, I was like, oh my God, I've now got a way to physically decompress all the tension inside me that's not going to be exhausting me, or it's, not that compulsive. So it was like opening a doorway of saying, hey, there's a healthy way over here, Richmond, where you can let your system unwind. And it was different to exercising it, and sort of exercising is like blowing the steam off the top. It was actually saying that underlying tension inside you, whether it's from anxiety or stress or just coping with the day, or again, it doesn't really matter what the external challenge is, but there's like, hey, there's a way, Richmond, where you can start to turn down the flame that's underneath the boiling pot that's you. And that was just completely revolutionary. Even talking about it now, I can feel that sense of relief, like, oh, finally, there's hope for me to be able to, decompress. And that's what happens to a lot of us. We get towards this burnout stage because we've lost the ability for the body to decompress and let go of that internal tension.
Love it. So talking about burnout, it's pretty near and dear to my heart of burnout, and I'm, educating myself about it and kind of working myself through it, which is going to be a lifelong habit and a lifelong challenge for myself to kind of regain my natural and kind of my old AJ self. But for yourself, for burnout, what came to light for you that you were on the path to burnout? Anything any warning signs or any key indicators for yourself?
Yeah. So look, this is something that it's only just landed for me in the last few months when I was doing a presentation for our Australia New Zealand Disaster and Emergency Management Conference and putting stuff together particularly from burnout. Because immediately when we say burnout, what comes to mind is I've got low energy, I'm exhausted. That's what happened to me as a 30-year-old or whatever. My body broke down. But what's fascinating, and I just think this is almost the most important information about burnout, is that burnout happens in stages or phases. And what we think about of burnout is the end stage where you're going, I've got low energy, I've got low motivation, my body is grinding down to a halt. So that's like stage 3. We have the term adrenal fatigue, which in the medical community, they argue, is that a real term? Is that really what's happening? But it doesn't really matter, because we all go, I've got low energy at work and I've got low energy at home and I'm starting to just feel shut down. Now, that is a physiological state of the nervous system to create that low energy, because the body's saying, we can't keep doing this. It's got to stop. So it slows us down. But if we come back to the first stage of burnout, doesn't sound like burnout at all. It's actually the complete opposite. And the first stage of burnout is one where we have high energy at work and high energy at home. So when we look at adrenaline and cortisol, adrenaline gives us that short-term spike of, meet the challenge, wake up, arousal, activation. And then when adrenaline's released short-term, it generally only stays in the body for up to an hour from when it's released. And if you're continually releasing it, there's more. But adrenaline releases cortisol. Cortisol takes longer to be activated in the body, but it takes much longer to dissipate. And a couple of critical things. First of all, adrenaline and cortisol are not stress hormones. We hear this all the time. They're actually energy hormones. They're not designed to create stress. They're designed to create energy, and then we've got the energy for movement. The difficulty or the fact that it happens in first responder work is that we often have regular little spikes of adrenaline throughout the day, which rise and fall, but they create releases of cortisol, which takes much longer to fall. So at the end of the day, if we look at our normal cortisol level, we should have a huge cortisol spike in the morning, which wakes us up from sleep, brings us to arousal. And if you're having a peaceful day, your cortisol levels will slowly decline across the course of the day, get right down to low, when it's getting to bedtime, and then they will cycle on again. When we're in a high stress, environment, we keep getting these adrenaline spikes through the day. The adrenaline might rise and fall, but the cortisol keeps getting triggered and released. So at the end of the day, you've got high cortisol levels. So what this means is when you're in this first stage of burnout, you're full of adrenaline cortisol at work, which often means you're performing at your peak because that's what those chemicals are designed to do. See, like, I'm on fire, I'm doing the job, I'm switched on, I feel alive, I love it. The first stage of burnout, however, has got nothing to do with fatigue. It's when you go home and you can't switch off because these adrenaline and cortisol cycles are still so active. So what it means is you've got high energy at work, but you've got high energy at home. So it doesn't look like burnout at all. And what's significant is when we don't understand this, most of us love that feeling of being switched on. It's part of the pleasure of working in a life and death environment. You feel so alive. Mm-hmm. So the first sign of burnout isn't fatigue or tiredness or low energy or low motivation. The first stage of burnout is I can't switch off when I get home. It takes me more than 5 or 10 minutes to fall asleep at night. When I get home, I can't relax and unwind and my breathing and my physiology slow down. I have to have some beers or I have to smoke some dope or I have to eat chocolate or I need to hit the gym for an hour. But even then, I lie in bed, my mind's racing, wakes me up. So this is where the paradox is. Most people who are in the first stage of burnout have got no idea because they're going, I've got a problem with energy levels. My it's hot. I can't switch off. But that is actually the first phase because it's not until that becomes a bit more chronic and it starts to catch up in the body. Then we start going, I've got high energy at work, but when I get home, I'm starting to feel low energy at home. And that's really the middle phase until it develops into the final stage of I've got low energy at work, low energy at home. I can't keep doing it and I'm burnout. So this is critical because most people aren't being saying, hey, your inability to get to sleep at night, that's a sign of burnout because it's the opposite to what we think of. And yet if we can catch it there, and this is again why we're saying, right, we need to train you how to down-regulate your system so that when you leave the station at the end of the day, your adrenaline cortisol's levels are back to where they were at the start of the day or as close as possible. It's not going to happen instantly, but the more you train it, the ability to switch on and switch off, that's what elite athletes are all about, physiologically, not just mentally. The more we train it, then we're going to start to interrupt this cycle because we're preventing, what we think of burnout and that low fatigue rather than trying to treat it or deal with it after the fact when people are going, I need time off work, I can't keep going. We're actually going to be saying, hang on, we're picking this up before it even gets to the element of fatigue or tiredness or low motivation. Does that explain that clearly? Like for me, that was just, I hadn't understood that until quite recently. And I'm like, that piece of information, if you want to look for burnout, don't look for the people who are fatigued. They've already got it. They're already, the story about the sheep. You're sitting on the river and the sheep comes past, you pull the sheep out and you keep pulling and there's more and more sheep. And eventually you walk upstream and fix the fence so the sheep aren't getting in. Again, this is what we need to be doing is going, okay, burnout, stage 1, high functioning, you're loving your job, you're pumped up, you're probably highly adrenalized, you go home, you want to go out on the town, you want to keep pumped, you want to hang out with your buddies because you're still in that highly adrenalized state. You go home and the family or the kids are all in a different state and there's a jarring. Mm-hmm. You're like, I don't feel alive. It happens with veterans as well. It's like, I don't feel alive when I'm here in the Western world because I'm used to feeling alive. And again, this is the thing is we love that state. Mm-hmm. We like it. It's like I feel pumped up when I go home. I don't want to calm down because I want to feel alive. And this is part of the education. And if we can do that and train the recovery cycle, then people go, right, I need to be able to be adrenalized and cortisol at work. And then when I need home, I need to be full of oxytocin and the hormones of recovery and relationships so that I can function outside in that sort of civilian environment.
that's kind of popped in my head is the divorce rate of first responders is extremely high. So you're coming home from your shift and your cortisol's up here, your adrenaline's up here, but your whole rest of your family is in a nice homeostasis, even keel. So no wonder there's conflict at home between partners and families and kids, and they're coming in
That's right.
totally unregulated to a
Yeah, that's right. Well, hopefully regulated. Not to say that the families are necessarily all regulated, but
Yes.
there's a disparity between the two.
yes.
And the thing is, when we are in these high adrenaline, high cortisol states, they're not designed for us to be relational. We're in life and death here. Everything's focused externally. We're not designed to be in touch with our inner self, our physiology. We're not meant to be, calm. We're meant to be tense and, hyper vigilant and hyper reactive. So I don't know, kid, leaves the Lego out and you don't just go, "Hey, darling, can you put your Lego away?" It's like, "What the fucking Lego?" Bang.
Totally.
And that system, we're designed, it's trained hypervigilance.
Mm.
So the thing is, it doesn't matter about whether your adrenaline, cortisol, stress, and trauma levels are high because you've had a critical incident or because you're training them to be high for trained hypervigilance at work so you can perform better. But when we have that chronic hypervigilance, then we also have chronic hyperreactivity. In those states also, Arjuna, what's really important to be aware of, as soon as we go into any level of an adrenaline response or a fight or flight stress response on any level, we start to lose connection with our own body because we're designed to not feel what's happening in our body so we can focus externally, even to the point where people sacrifice their own lives in order to save others. So it's a huge skill. But what it often leads to is then when we come home from work, we're disconnected from what's happening in our physiology. We're disconnected from, peace, calm, comfort, softness, compassion. There's a physiology that's accompanying the hypervigilant state, which is not, that physiology is not designed to nurture deep, intimate connections.
Right.
And this is what it's not just about performing at work. It's also about, let's not call it performing, but it's about relating at home and being able to maintain, relationships and deep connections with our loved ones.
So powerful. You mentioned earlier the power of breath work. How does that relate and support prevention from burnout?
Yeah. So in my experience, the ability to change your physiology in the moment in real time is one of the most incredible skills, because with TRE, it's something you would tend to more do, when your body's not going to shake while you're, holding the hose and fighting the fire. When you need to be in active mode, it will tend to only happen before or afterwards, like you've said, when your body's in recovery mode. But in the moment, training the ability to regulate our nervous system can be critical. So how do we consciously calm down our system? And when we look at the central nature of breath, one of my teachers talks about it as, the breath is the remote control to the nervous system. The ability, if you can change your breath, you're changing the state of your nervous system. If you're stressed and anxious, I can think about stuff, but if my breathing's still fast, my body's getting that feedback that we're under stress here. So being able to consciously regulate the breath, I believe, and it's well reported in sort of especially training in soldiers where, breath training. We're not talking about necessarily traditional breath work where we think of hyperventilating for half an hour and doing like a cathartic release, which can be absolutely amazing and critical for healing. But what we're talking about really is breath control in the moment. So I can go, right, I can feel I'm a bit tense. I need to consciously calm down. Or I'm feeling a bit tired. I need to consciously wake my system up so I can be activated. Now, that's a skill like, yogis have been practicing for thousands of years, but it often takes a fair bit of training. So most people, you can't say, "Hey, look, just take these breaths and calm your heart rate down." You do it, you practice it, you're like, "Oh, I think it's working. I'm not sure." It takes a lot of training, but it's a really practical skill and an active tool you can use in the moment to consciously regulate your system. When we combine that with TRE, where, TRE is re-regulating your system that's outside your conscious control, I think they're just the two perfect partners. Mindset training and all that stuff's relevant, but no matter what you think, if your physiology is not coming along with you, it's never going to make a difference to how you're feeling. And so that ability to learn to consciously regulate the breath is, I think it's probably if not one of the most valuable tools that people can have when you need to consciously change states.
So to kind of summarize this whole thing, if listeners listening today can take away two things, breathwork and TRE, they could solve a lot of issues in their own well-being, their own health, their own nervous system, just with two simple strategies. Does that summarize it in one nutshell? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I don't like the term breath work, like breath training, for want of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
So people aren't thinking, I've got to do the half an hour, hyperventilating.
Right.
You
Yeah.
might do, but it's about going, can I deepen my breath? Can I slow my breath? Can I increase my carbon dioxide tolerance so my system's not as reactive? All those things. That's for me like the active tool.
Mm-hmm.
That's consciously directed tool. And then TRE is call it passive tool, where you're learning to let go and surrender and let your body lead the process. The breath work, your mind's leading it. The TRE, the body's leading it, and those two fit together. But it will make a huge difference, because we'll be able to help people regulate the cycle of adrenaline, activation, down regulation, and recovery that we're missing that down regulation and recovery phase in terms of training it. If we get that in balance, then that's going to make a huge difference. But it does make a difference. Diet is critical.
Mm-hmm.
General exercise levels, most first responders are already pretty active, so that's not generally such an issue. But, mindset as well. There's all different factors. And if we only ever focus on ourselves and we're not in a good relational space, that's going to have a detrimental effect as well. So it's not like these aren't the only keys.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of them a bit like, it's like the remote control. These are like really, really critical tools that if people learn to access them, they can begin to train their recovery and their resilience to match the way we train the skills and our endurance.
I love the remote control, because that definitely paints a real fast, quick picture. And then you also look at the volume or the channel selector, and you could, increase it or decrease it. You could switch channels, which is maybe some breath training to TRE. It's a great analogy. I love it. That's great.
Yeah. And again, we sort of think, it might be a bit woo-woo or whatever, but this is what the samurai and the ancient warriors were practicing. They're going, if we want to be elite, warriors, we need to have this mind control, this breath control, we're dying, all of those things. So we're slowly starting to catch up from, the model of, I'm a first responder, I work hard, I drink hard, I eat hard, I party hard, I do everything hard, of going, hang on, if we want to be able to sustain this, we need to be able to harden up when we need to be able to soften down, be active, stand down. That's the real, that's the missing link.
Yeah, love it. So in closing, Richmond, what's one message you'd love our first responder community to hear from you today that really needs to get through to them? What's one message that you'd love to share with us?
Can I have two?
No, okay. Two.
No.
Yes, of course you can.
So the first message that comes to me is that you are worth it, and you are vital, and you are valued, and you are valuable, and we need you to be looking after yourselves and training your recovery, partly so you can keep doing your jobs, but primarily so you can be happy and healthy doing, this invaluable work. I think that's my primary message is, don't put up with it. Don't just keep going, it's killing me, but I'll just keep going until I have to stop, or I stop and I'm going to end up with chronic disease and heart disease and stroke and cancer when I'm 65.
Mm-hmm.
People you are and the work that you're doing is way too valuable for that. So I really implore you to, take care of yourselves, learn these techniques, invest that time so that you're happy and healthy, because we need you to be happy and healthy for the rest of us to be, happy and healthy, that you're not sacrificing yourself for your work when you don't need to be. The second thing is, in terms of TRE, is during COVID, I created a free online course for people to learn TRE. It's an introduction. It's 3 guided sessions and a little bit of the physiology. So what I'd encourage you to do is, if you're feeling interested and like, hey, this makes sense and I want to learn the TRE component, the best way to get started, or an easy way to get started, is if you just go to trecourse.com. The course is currently free. It's not meant to be free forever, but it's free at the moment. You can go in there and learn the technique for yourself. And then if you have any difficulties with it, there are TRE providers all around the world who are desperately waiting for people to come and see them so they can share this with them. So yeah, I really encourage you to go. Don't just take this away and go, hey, this is interesting. Take the action to learn the technique. If that's not calling, learn breathing, learn some breath training, so that you can look after yourself. And if I can slip in a third one, because Arjuna, I like to talk. The third one is be aware that this information is critical for your colleagues and your friends as well. If you've listened to this podcast and like, oh, this is making sense, I've got to get onto this. I think first responders already do a pretty good job of looking after their friends, but make sure you share this information with your colleagues, share it up the chain with your managers. Because managers, they're a bit scared of TRE at the moment. They're like, oh, there's not enough research. We haven't done all this, but across the board and evaluations, when people get the chance to do it for themselves, they invariably rate it as being as effective, if not more effective than any other form of resilience training they've done. So
couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so we just need people to get access to it. So please spread the word, because we need this information about recovery, about the tremor reflex being a positive recovery resource. We need that to spread. People like myself and you, we're doing all we can, but really it spreads at the grassroots level. So, pass this podcast on to someone that you know and care for, who's in a position to help spread the word.
Yeah, great. Wise words. Yeah, for myself, TRE it's one of those things that I really, truly feel that every firefighter should try at least once. Maybe it's not going to fit their lifestyle, their personality, whatever, but everyone should at least try TRE once with all their other modalities that they want to do, but just try it once. And you'll most likely be hooked and love it and find so much value out of it, but just try it. Just try it.
Yeah, totally concur. I like to say to people something, brush your teeth and shake your body. Like, it's a form of somatic hygiene, or body, neuromuscular hygiene, in the same way that we brush our teeth. It's better than that because it's replenishing and restorative, not just cleaning. But yeah, completely agree. Give it a try. And if you're struggling with it and you don't like it, get help from a TRE provider so that you can make it work and you enjoy it. Because again, TRE is not a modality even, or really a technique. It's actually accessing this innate recovery reflex that we've got. You've already got it inside your body. So if you're not using it, get help so that you can use it. It's not a question of whether it works or not. We've evolved with this, and so it's a human birthright that we should all know about and be using in a positive and helpful way.
Human birthright. I love it. So how can people learn more about Richmond Heath, and how can they connect with you if they want to connect with you, other than the course you mentioned?
Yeah, so through trecourse.com to learn the technique, or the website that I'm mainly affiliated with is just treaustralia.com. So you can there are quite a number of presentations. For example, if you've got a manager that you want to say, hey, I've listened to this podcast, it's great. There's a lot of conference presentations. So I recently got one up there. It's only 20 or 18 minutes, what every first responder needs to know about adrenaline, where we talk about this and burnout. So there's some really useful information on that website at treaustralia.com. But also, if you're interested in TRE and you're not in Australia, as most of the listeners probably won't be, if you go to the website traumaprevention.com, then there's TRE providers all around the world. And then, of course, as listeners here, you've also got Arjuna, who's a TRE provider, and so you've got a great contact there. So it's not necessarily about getting in touch with me per se, as much as get in touch with this shaking reflex so that you learn how to use it for your own health and well-being.
Perfect. Yeah, all your resources and links to all that will be in the show notes for our listeners as well. So easy to find. Yeah. Well, Richmond, I consider you and Berselli as gurus in the TRE world. I've never physically met David Berselli, but I've talked to you many times, and I've learned so much about TRE, about our human body, about the nervous system. It's just incredible that I actually have the opportunity to sit down and listen to you and chat with you for the last hour about the power of TRE and how it can truly, truly change people's lives. So I just want to acknowledge your dedication, your expertise in this realm of holistic work, because I really truly feel that you are making a difference in the world for sure. So just wanted to express my gratitude to you.
Yeah, thanks, Arjuna. And I'm sort of same in the opposite direction where, I just have so much gratitude for what first responders do. And, I'm passionate about saying, oh, I just wish it wasn't costing so much of their lives and their well-being.
Mhm.
So yeah, I just think we need to be doing much more for our first responders. Yeah. So
Well,
very, very,
we
very
keep
happy to
looking at
share.
ways to reduce the suicide rate, and maybe things like this can slowly start lowering those numbers, right? So,
Yeah, definitely.
all right, all the best, everyone. Richmond Heath, amazing man. Thank you all. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations